Hi, welcome to Ms. Richardson's U.S. History 5-Minute Lectures. This information will be U.S. Note 6.2, Technology of the 80s and 90s. It includes information that aligns with the first section on your Unit 6 study guide. Remember, you control the lecture. Use your study guide to figure out what's important, pause, write down any questions, and rewatch as often as you need. Let's go ahead and get started. In the last set of notes, you heard an overview of society of the 80s and 90s. Today I want to give you some more specific, detailed information about how technology impacted these two decades. The space race had begun as part of the Cold War. So this is big technology, right? The space race was that whole race to get the first man into space, the first man to orbit the Earth, the first man on the moon. But in the 1980s, we began to see a new era in space. In 1981, the first space shuttle, the Columbia, was launched. 2 years later, the first female astronaut, Sally Ride, went into space. America was doing well in the space program. And then, in 1986, disaster struck. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds after liftoff, killing everyone on board. This mission had been covered heavily by the media because one of the astronauts was a teacher, Christa McAuliffe, who had won a contest to get the chance to go to space. Students all over the country watched the launch in their classrooms, including the explosion. It devastated the space program and really America. So NASA was, however, able to recover with the beginning of the International Space Station later that same year. So people were still nervous and upset, but they started the International Space Station. It was an international effort. It spread goodwill, and it helped bring good faith back to the space programs in the U.S. Other technology also grew enormously during the 80s and 90s. We saw the rise of the computer, first through the microprocessor that made computers smaller and more compact, then through companies that competed to make better personal computers, like Apple, IBM, and Microsoft all began in the 1980s or the 1990s, and they really did change life forever. Media also grew due to the technology boom. In the 1980s, CNN became the first ever 24-hour news network. Also in 1980, BET, Black Entertainment Television, began to promote Black businesses and culture. That was their purpose. And the following year, 1981, MTV began showing music videos. Seriously, they actually showed videos all day long back then. I know, crazy. And BET and MTV together helped to usher in the rise of rap as a popular music style and really influence culture after that point. Now, as I mentioned before, video games, in particular home video games like Atari and Nintendo, developed using computer technology during the time. Then, phones began to change. Americans quickly went from desktop phones to cordless phones, and then to cellular phones. Here you can see a cellular phone in the 80s. Suddenly, you could be in touch with people from anywhere, and they have gotten smaller and smaller since then. Added to this whole idea was the internet. The internet first started in 1985 with several supercomputers talking to one another. So that was the first internet. It did not include any home personal computers. However, this new invention quickly became more popular, added more computers, added browsers and .com businesses, and they became a multi-million-dollar industry. That added greatly to the business growth of the 1990s. While this greatly increased access to information and made communication faster, easier, and cheaper, it also gave almost instant access when news happened, like the Challenger explosion, the Rodney King beating, or the O.J. Simpson trial. And we'll talk about those last two soon. We'll definitely look at them in class. Some questioned if this was actually too much information available to people. It also split the rich and the poor. Access to technology increased knowledge. Knowledge leads to success in education. Education leads to wealth. Those trapped in poverty could not afford these new technologies. Therefore, they were trapped in a culture of poverty with no way out. that added to increased feelings of powerlessness, inferiority, and worthlessness in some Americans. Overall, these trends happened very quickly and continue today. In 1983, less than 1% of the population had a personal computer. In 2000, it was over 24% who had a personal computer. And as of 2013, smartphones give mobile access to the internet to over 63% of Americans. And then others even have computers at home. So we definitely have changed very, very quickly. And this is the end of US Notes 6.2. Hopefully you learned something. I'll see you in class with any questions you have.